office. I was waiting for the first script for season 3, the 2. I said, "How's it going?" He said, "Okay." I said, "You seem, a little measured." He said, "Well, I gouged out Ty's eye." And I said, "Okay, it's going to be great." I don't know, but what possessed? Were you bored, or what was it that possessed you?
I was writing the script for the sort of arc on New Caprica, and we had talked about that somebody should come away from this experience with a scar, an emotional scar, and then we had various sort of dramatic things for how people were going to be emotionally scarred, and that didn't feel like it was enough, and it felt like losing an eye was a visible scar that a character could carry with him.
Yes, it was.
Yes, it was, and that would stand in for a lot of people who suffered and who bore a lot of different wounds and scars from this experience. That speech, it was important to somehow really confront what they were doing in the show. That it was going to be. They were going to use this tactic, that these people in this extraordinary circumstance were going to use anything that they had. Then Colonel Ty would be the one that no matter what, he was going to fight. He was going to fight with a rock. He was going to fight with a stick. He was going to put a bomb on a kid and send him into a parade ground and blow people up. He was not going to quit. And somebody had to call him on it, and somebody had to confront him about that. And that he had a rationale. He wasn't crazy, and that in some ways was more frightening and more disturbing, is that he wasn't crazy, and it was a very rational and it was a very thought out method that he had chosen to use, and he would back it up, and even when he was called on it, he was going to keep doing it. And I just felt like it was important to put that idea out there and to make people think about it, and to make people think that the people that do these things are human beings, and they get to this place not because their brains have fried and that they've taken drugs or something, although I'm sure that's happened, but a lot of them get there because they think about it and they've made a decision to do it, and that's a much more difficult thing to confront, I think.
Well, it also, sort of shows you what people are capable of when all their hope is gone, when everything goes. All of the rational things that you know that you should be doing go out the window, and then it becomes something else. So one of the things I think that the show also does is it puts a human face to not just rage, but desperation, And when we're watching you talk about the time that you guys have been on New Caprica and hearing just not the hopelessness, but the tone of disappointment of not finding what you hoped for and feeling that was it. Knowing that, of course, Adam is out there somewhere, but we don't know if he's dead.
Yeah.
We don't know if he left. We don't know what happened to him. So if you haven't seen this part, just know that something good's coming.
Well, if I may, the interesting thing acting in that territory was that the insurgency and the feeling of togetherness and the feeling of this is the only action we can take, and it is an action, and our survival could depend on it, was very powerful and palpable. When I had to turn around as the character and confront Saul Ty on the suicide bombing issue, I was surprised at how difficult that was for the president, who had just been so deeply committed to the insurgency, to suddenly pull out a higher idea and confront a co-insurgent with it was a really complex switching of experiences that one would expect. And I really admired it as a confusion.
So you're working on really making it better. So what you're saying is that we are making inroads here at the UN to balancing this issue out. Is that basically what you're telling us?
We have a very long way to go, but we are making very real inroads. Let me give you just one taste of this. As part of this discussion, governments are very uncomfortable talking about national security issues, what they consider the most kind of close-held rights and authorities of governments, to talk with 191 other governments. But then you start talking about letting real people in the doors, people off the streets, NGOs, people with ideas on this, media. It gets very scary very fast. Well, what has happened that's very interesting is we said if we are to address this problem, we have to break out of the cones that we're talking about this issue in. Let's open up the conversation. We need a global campaign against terrorism. It has to be and feel unacceptable to everybody. Not just some people, but everybody. How do you do that? We started with victims. After every terrorist bombing, every terrorist act, and they happen just about every week of the year, somewhere on this planet, there are victims. And for a few days, there are cameras, people look at them, people listen to them, and then they're gone. Except they're not. They and their families suffer for years and years to come. In most places, they don't get much of anything in the way of services. They don't get support. They not only get forgotten, but they, in some ways, get kind of blamed for what they were victims of. Hey, don't make noise about this. I know that happened a long time ago. Can't you move on? Societies want to forget about it. By bringing victims into this actual chamber, last September, first meeting ever in the history of this world, where we brought victims from all over the world into this chamber, sitting where all these colonists are sitting down here. And these victims told their stories. Every religion, every culture, every part of this planet. And I watched ambassadors take their talking points and throw them out. We started the conversation all over again because these are real people who have real needs that we need to meet. And when they talked about terrorism, it was personal, but it was so clear what we had to do. And so it's helped to mobilize now victims from around the world are starting to talk to each other, talking to us, talking to their governments. So we're starting to make some inroads on this global movement against terrorism. Let's not just treat this as a policing action. Let's actually change hearts and minds and get on with the business of living and loving and all the things we should be doing.
Right on.
Well, I will take one question, and you're going to have to decide which one. Pick a number.
Oh, number one, right here.
No, yes, person there.
Hi, I'm Francis Jimenez, and I just want to thank you all for this opportunity and joining you here tonight. My question is as follows. In respect to the destruction of one quorum and specifically how it was handled on one episode, what commentary are you making to people living in times of crisis and hardships?
Say that one more time. Say it one more time.
In respect to the destruction of one quorum and specifically how it was handled on one episode, what commentary are you making to people living in times of crisis and hardships?
Thank you.
With respect to the destruction of the quorum. Okay.
He's referring to an episode in which there was an attempted coup aboard Galactica. There was a mutiny aboard ship, and during that process, Tom Zarek, who was the vice president, was trying to assume the roles of the presidency and sought support from the quorum, which was the elected body of representatives that formed the civilian government. And when they refused to give it to them, he had them all shot, and they were all killed within the quorum chamber itself.